England in the 1640s was a land torn apart by civil war, fear, and suspicion. The chaos of war shattered daily life, leaving villages vulnerable and lawless. With men away fighting, communities grew anxious, searching for scapegoats to explain their suffering. Religious anxiety fueled the fire. Preachers warned of the devil's agents lurking everywhere. Superstition blurred the line between misfortune and malice. A sick cow or a harsh word could spark accusations of witchcraft. The breakdown of justice allowed fear-driven rumors to spiral unchecked. Into this turmoil, people yearned for someone to restore order and root out evil. The stage was set for a man who would claim to see the devil's work and offer a terrible solution. Matthew Hopkins, a name that echoes through the annals of history, synonymous with the darkest chapters of the English witch trials. Born the son of James Hopkins, a respected clergyman in Suffolk, his early life offered few hints of the terror he would later unleash. He was raised in a world steeped in religious fervor, where the line between piety and paranoia often blurred. Before his infamous transformation, Matthew Hopkins was, by all accounts, an unremarkable man, seemingly destined for a life of quiet obscurity. He was neither wealthy nor particularly influential, blending seamlessly into the tapestry of 17th century English society. But the tumultuous backdrop of the English Civil War, a time of immense social and political upheaval, created a fertile ground for fear and suspicion. It was in this climate of widespread anxiety that paranoia gave him purpose, a dark and destructive one. The spark that ignited Hopkins's sinister career was struck in 1644, in the small town of Manningtree, Essex. Here, amidst the everyday lives of ordinary people, rumors of witchcraft began to circulate, whispers that spoke of dark pacts and malevolent deeds. These rumors, fueled by the anxieties of the time, gave Hopkins his chance, an opportunity to seize power and notoriety. He saw a void, a space where fear could be exploited, and he stepped into it with chilling determination. Hopkins fueled the flames of suspicion, claiming to overhear gatherings of women plotting with the devil, weaving tales of dark rituals and supernatural conspiracies. His accusations, though unsubstantiated, resonated with the growing fear in the community. He then boldly presented himself as an expert on witchcraft to the desperate magistrates, offering his services to uncover and prosecute these supposed agents of evil. The authorities, overwhelmed and uncertain, readily accepted his offer. With the legal system already weakened and in disarray due to the ongoing civil war, Hopkins found little resistance to his methods. The normal checks and balances of justice were eroded, leaving communities vulnerable to his manipulations. Hopkins, along with his ruthless associate John Stern, quickly secured confessions through brutal interrogation techniques, sleep deprivation, and outright torture. These forced testimonies, extracted under duress, became the foundation of their accusations. These confessions, however obtained, were enough to launch his career as a witch hunter, a profession built on fear, paranoia, and the manipulation of justice. Emboldened by his initial success, he adopted the self-styled title of Witchfinder General, a grandiose and entirely self-proclaimed position that lent him an air of authority and legitimacy. Hopkins wielded power not through legitimate legal authority, but through the potent force of fear, intimidation, and the exploitation of widespread panic. His methods were designed to instill terror and extract confessions, regardless of their truth. With his newfound authority, Hopkins and his team of assistants traveled throughout East Anglia, spreading their reign of terror from town to town. They charged towns exorbitant fees for their services, profiting handsomely from the fear and desperation of communities seeking to rid themselves of perceived evil. Hopkins and his crew were masters of manipulation, stoking hysteria wherever they went, turning neighbor against neighbor and creating an atmosphere of pervasive dread. His authority was, in essence, a pure performance, a carefully constructed facade designed to deceive and intimidate. It was a potent combination of unwavering confidence, calculated manipulation, and a keen understanding of human psychology. He offered the promise of safety and security in a world that felt increasingly chaotic and dangerous, a promise that resonated deeply with frightened communities. Desperate for control and a return to normalcy, communities embraced his crusade, willingly handing over their neighbors and friends to his merciless justice. In a stunning and tragic turn of events, Hopkins transformed himself from a relatively unknown and unsuccessful lawyer, struggling to find his place in the world, to the most feared and reviled man in England, a figure of immense power and terrifying influence. Hundreds of innocent lives were irrevocably altered by his actions, their fates hanging precariously in the balance. And ultimately, their very existence would soon hang on his word, his accusations, and his twisted interpretation of justice. Hopkins didn't invent witch-hunting methods, but he perfected them into a system of terror. Accused women were isolated, deprived of sleep, and watched relentlessly, psychological torture designed to break them. Exhausted and confused, many confessed to anything just to end the ordeal. Hopkins used intimidation and leading questions, twisting every word or event into evidence of guilt. Even a stray animal or a muttered phrase became proof of witchcraft. Under pressure, victims often named others, fueling a chain reaction of accusations. Hopkins's process wasn't about truth. It was about manufacturing guilt and expanding his reach. Central to Hopkins's investigations was the search for the devil's mark, a blemish or mole said to prove a pact with Satan. Accused women were stripped and examined in humiliating public rituals. Any mark, no matter how ordinary, could be declared a sign of witchcraft. Prickers used trick pins to prove the mark was insensible to pain, sealing the victim's fate. This staged evidence convinced magistrates and terrified communities alike. The devil's mark turned rumor into fact, making escape nearly impossible. For Hopkins, it was the cornerstone of his prosecutions. For the accused, it was a brand of guilt from which there was no return. The swimming test, a horrifying practice rooted in superstition and fear, was undoubtedly Hopkins's most infamous ordeal. It stands as a stark reminder of the depths of cruelty humanity can sink to when gripped by irrational beliefs. The test was based on the deeply ingrained belief that pure water, seen as a gift from God and a symbol of purity, would instinctively reject a witch, a being considered inherently evil and corrupt. This belief stemmed from medieval times, where the natural world was often imbued with spiritual significance. Under this twisted logic, the accused, often elderly women or social outcasts, were bound, typically with their thumbs tied to their toes, and then unceremoniously thrown into a river or pond. The act itself was brutal and dehumanizing. Floating to the surface was interpreted as undeniable proof of guilt, a sign that the pure water was rejecting the accused. Sinking, on the other hand, was seen as evidence of innocence. But this came often at the terrible risk of drowning. The innocent victim might be pulled out if anyone bothered, but the process itself was inherently dangerous and often deadly. Beyond the physical danger, the test was a spectacle of public humiliation designed to strip the accused of their dignity and standing within the community. The entire event was carefully staged to terrify and convince the crowd of the accused's guilt, further solidifying the witch hunt hysteria that gripped the region. Fear was a powerful tool in Hopkins's arsenal. The way victims were bound, often in contorted positions, and the fact that their clothing, particularly the voluminous skirts common at the time, trapped air, making them float. This almost guaranteed a guilty verdict regardless of the truth. The test was designed to fail. The outcome was, in essence, rigged from the start, a predetermined outcome masked as a divine judgment. It was a cruel spectacle, a performance of injustice rather than a genuine attempt to uncover the truth. Though technically illegal under English common law, the chaos and breakdown of order during the English Civil War allowed Hopkins to use it with impunity, exploiting the fear and uncertainty of the times. For the accused, trapped in this web of superstition and fear, it was a no-win situation. Float and face the hangman's noose, or sink beneath the surface and die a watery death. The swimming test perfectly epitomized the witch hunt's inherent brutality, its complete disregard for human life, and its reliance on twisted logic to justify its cruel persecution. Hopkins's victims were mostly poor elderly women, widows, healers, or outsiders. Lacking protection, they were easy targets for accusations born of fear or grudges. An accusation destroyed reputations, families, and livelihoods overnight. Interrogation was torture-stripped, prick-deprived of sleep, and subjected to the swimming test. Confessions were coerced, and trials were mere formalities before the gallows. Hopkins's brief reign led to around 300 executions, over half of all English witchcraft deaths in 3 centuries. The witch hunts left scars of fear and mistrust that lingered long after the executions ended. Hopkins claimed he was on a holy mission, citing scripture to justify his actions. He framed his work as a spiritual battle, making it hard for communities to question him. But his fees were substantial, and critics accused him of profiting from panic. John Gall, a brave clergyman, publicly challenged Hopkins, calling him a charlatan exploiting fear for gain. Was Hopkins a true believer or a cunning opportunist? Likely both. He thrived on a mix of religious fervor, personal ambition, and the chaos of war. Hopkins' legacy is a warning. Belief and greed can be a deadly combination. His witch hunts were as much about profit as piety. By 1646, public opinion turned against Hopkins. Skepticism grew as his methods and motives were questioned, especially his fees and the predictability of his accusations. Influential critics and judges began to challenge his authority and evidence. As the war ended and the legal system recovered, courts rejected his cases and acquitted the accused. Hopkins' power evaporated almost overnight. Forced into retirement, he returned to Manningtree. His reign of terror abruptly ended. The Witchfinder General faded into obscurity as reason and law reclaimed England. Matthew Hopkins' reign of terror was shockingly brief. He cast a dark shadow over the English countryside for a relatively short period. Hopkins died in 1647, likely of tuberculosis, his brief, brutal career over by his late 20s. It's a chilling thought that such a young man could wield so much destructive power, fueled by paranoia and superstition. His death, though perhaps a relief to many, didn't erase the scars he left behind. Yet, legend soon claimed he was accused of witchcraft himself. The rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by the collective anger and resentment of those he had wronged and subjected to his own swimming test, where, in poetic justice, he floated. The irony wouldn't have been lost on the people of the time, a taste of his own medicine, even if only in legend. This story, though untrue, reflected the public's need for retribution. They yearned for justice, for someone to pay for the terror that had gripped their communities. Hopkins's real legacy is darker. He showed how fear and fanaticism can be weaponized by a single man. He exploited the anxieties of a society already on edge, turning neighbor against neighbor. His methods left a trail of suffering and death, a cautionary tale for generations. It serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of reason in the face of widespread panic. In times of chaos, belief can become a weapon, and justice can vanish overnight. The institutions meant to protect the innocent can crumble under the weight of fear. Hopkins remains a chilling reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria. His name is forever linked to a dark chapter in history. His story warns us the price of fanaticism is always paid in human lives. It's a lesson we must never forget, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. The echoes of Hopkins's actions still resonate today, a somber warning against the dangers of unchecked power and the seductive allure of irrational fear.